Having gotten involved with the Hunter x Hunter community nearly 4 years ago now, I've taken note of the fact that the 1999 anime adaptation has a somewhat negative perception amongst the general community. Well, that's not entirely true. 90s anime aesthetic lovers love it, Leo Pika shippers love it, but mostly older fans who got into the series before the 2011 reboot love it. But if I were to ask a general Hunter x Hunter fan what they thought of the series, I'd probably be met with silence and a shrug, the I don't know kind of shrug to be exact. And that's if the person I ask even knew there was an old Hunter x Hunter anime, because a large number of people are surprised to learn Hunter x Hunter 2011 wasn't the first crack at adapting the manga, or that it's even old enough for its first anime to have been dated to the late 90s in the first place. But, because of that, discussion about the old series is nearly non-existent, particularly on YouTube, where I'm only now starting to see any sort of discussion about the older, seemingly elusive 1999 anime. And I suppose it might seem natural that 99 fade into the background when 2011 is so popular and good, but, meanwhile in the Full Metal Alchemist community, I find that discussion surrounding the original adaptation from 2003, which preceded the more critically acclaimed retelling, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, is still going strong, alongside heavy debate over which version is the best. It's Brotherhood, no cap. And yet, to be fair, 2003 is basically its own thing compared to Brotherhood, whereas 1999 and 2011 are both, adaptations of the manga. But nonetheless, for an anime so popular, the old anime just kind of, exists for the majority of fans. So if there is any sort of general perception amongst the community for the show, it's something along the lines of the 2011 anime did the manga complete justice, and the 1999 anime did something. It looks pretty, I guess, and Kurapika's hotter or something, I don't know. It's a real shame, because honestly, despite the very quiet reception in the present, I think 99 is absolutely top tier, despite popular assumption honestly matching the quality of 2011. And I'd go as far to say, it stands the test of time as one of the all-time great shonen adaptations. In fact, when My Anime List introduced their ranking system for their most popular anime, from the moment they introduced the ranking, Hunter x Hunter 1999 was 5th place on the ranking, only behind Death Note, Haruhi, One Piece, and Full Metal Alchemist 2003. And putting aside our thoughts and opinions on Mal's top list, I think Hunter x Hunter's placement in that day and age really showcases that 99 is a little more than meets the eye. And really, this video exists for me to essentially just waste your time by talking about it and why you should all give it a chance. This is a video essay about Hunter x Hunter from 1999. So, yeah, Hunter x Hunter 1999 is an adaptation of the original Hunter x Hunter manga. No duh, but what I mean by that is that there aren't any real strings attached to that statement. This isn't a Full Metal 2003 situation where the entire plot from the back half is reworked. It isn't mostly taking liberties with the story, and it doesn't even have an original ending. 99 sets out to be a pretty faithful adaptation of the original manga. There are a couple of particular differences in the story and certain characters, but overall 1999 is exactly what it wants to be, an anime adaptation of Hunter x Hunter. So now, how exactly does it go about being an adaptation of the manga? Well, let's start by analyzing their adaptations of the individual story arcs, starting with the Hunter exams. The first couple of episodes are definitely the most sluggish part getting in, and where I feel all the bad pacing criticisms come from. Episodes 2 through 6 are genuinely not paced well for what they are, and I can't blame people for not being the biggest fan right out the gate, especially since 2011 breezes through this material in about 3 or 4 episodes. Heck, episode 2 is completely non-canon, something I'll spend more time discussing later, and consequently why you won't see me talk about it just yet. But back to the pacing issues, it's really down to what material is covered and how much attention it is given. Episodes 3, 4, and 5 each cover singular chapters, and while it's acceptable in the case of episode 3 given a lot goes down in the chapter it is based on, episodes 4 and 5 could have easily been condensed into a single episode without losing much, as is what happened in 2011 when it covered this material. Episode 6 isn't the worst, but I can imagine by that point many people were just hoping the proper exams would just get started already, so an episode dedicated to essentially setting up the first exam and a filler episode that extends said exam may not have thrilled certain audience members. I will say though, not only is episode 7 an absolutely phenomenal episode that uses pre-existing material to effectively deliver the feels and build Leorio's character, once out of phase 1, the anime's pacing mostly lines up with 2011. The second exam is a little longer than its 2011 counterpart, but that's due in part to 2011 essentially rewriting the entire thing so they could compress it. Because of that, we lose out on some world building, great character interactions, and menshi. Girls without saying, but that's a huge L. While there are some anime-only moments after this, for the most part, the pacing really starts to click around around this section, and is why for a long time I never really got the whole bad pacing criticism. It's certainly not a problem across the majority of the show. I feel that perception is mostly due to how many fans are used to 2011 absolutely sweeping through this arc in its version, covering it in 10 episodes less than 1999. Though, to be fair, the fact that it's in 10 episodes less has more to do with the amount of entirely non-canon episodes in this part of 1999. Again, I'll get to those later. That being said though, while I did criticize the first few episodes, I want to clarify that my problems only exist for episodes 2 through 6. Episode 1 is an entirely different story. I'd go as far to say it's phenomenal. Definitely one of the most glaring problems with the 2011 adaptation was its handling of the first chapter. It only covers about half of the pages, and not in great detail either, before hastily moving on to chapter 2, so the audience could be introduced to Leorio and Kurapika. Because of this, the audience misses out on the introduction of Kite. This is obviously an issue not only because he is the person responsible for letting Gon know that his dad's alive and a hunter, which kickstarts this entire story in the first place, but also because he returns for Chimera Ants, and his involvement in that arc is entirely responsible for Gon's characterization during the events of that story, something which is based in their pre-established relationship. Because we don't know Kite until literally the last possible moment, many audience members find Kite to be shoehorned in, not understanding that in the manga he was there from the get-go. You'd think 99 wouldn't need Kite and him meeting Gon to kickstart this story since Chimera Ants wouldn't begin for another 5 years, but Kite's importance is more than just that he's important in Chimera Ants. Kite's introduction not only serves as the perfect catalyst for the events of the story, but also the perfect opportunity to characterize Gon with, something which 1999 takes full advantage of by expanding upon the events of this episode and using it as an opportunity to explore Gon as a character and his relationship with his aunt. So when the episode ends, you truly feel that last hug between the two as Gon departs for the hunter exams. I've seen some people say that the characterization of Gon and Mito are off, which I don't think is true at all. People seem to misunderstand Gon's funny cuteness as being all he's about when Chimera Ants shows he's much deeper than that. And this episode and the chapter it's based around subtly hint at that, so I don't really see the problem there. Ultimately, the point I want to get across is that I think episode 1 of Hunter x Hunter 99 is a great start to the series. It is very different from what the series starts to become during the Hunter exams proper, but I like the character-driven narrative that moves this episode forward because it ultimately gives the audience a much greater sense of connection with Gon, something that is really important for immersing yourself into the story. In fact, while a lot of people criticize how 99 often changes specifics of the story, I think that people tend to ignore how a lot of these actually work in favor of the storytelling. Episode 1 is a great example of that, as the order of events are changed to give more impact to the final moments of the episode when Gon finally leaves on his journey. In the original chapter, Gon gets the big fish and then we're given the important flashback contextualizing the sequence and telling us what this moment meant to Gon. However, in 99, the flashback comes first, and the episode builds itself towards the moment Gon gets the big fish, changing the moment from a simple character-establishing moment to an incredibly satisfactory moment, highlighting that his journey has just begun. And 99 is really sprinkled with a lot of these subtle changes that really drive this story, but I'll discuss the pros and cons of this approach later on. For now, let's move on. How exactly does Hunter x Hunter 99 handle each of the specific story arcs it covers? Now, Hunter x Hunter has a total of 9 story arcs, 7 of which are covered in the 2011 adaptation. 1999, on the other hand, covers 5, ending with Great Island, with a cliffhanger for what would have been its adaptation of Chimera Ants, which didn't happen for one reason or another. However, given 1999's Great Island adaptation has an almost entirely different production team with different animators, directors, storyboarders, etc., a lot of Hunter x Hunter 99 fans tend to just entirely ignore Great Island in 1999, often considering it an entirely different show. Because of that, arguably 99 only covers 4 story arcs: the Hunter exams, the Zoldyck family, Heaven's Arena, and York New City. And if you want to get really technical, initially 99 only covered 2/3 of York New before abruptly ending because it caught up with the manga. It's only thanks to the 2002 York New conclusion OVA that the rest of the story got adapted, but the original TV airing, and consequently the English dub, ends midway through the story. But semantics aside, how exactly does 99 present these story arcs? While the Hunter exams does start off notably slower than its 2011 counterpart, and arguably even compared to the manga, once the story gets the ball rolling, it does not stop. It surprises me to this day that the Hunter exams is considered one of those story arcs you kind of have to grit your teeth through in order to get to all the better stuff. Because personally, this arc is easily among the best that Hunter x Hunter had to offer, and I think 99's presentation of it is part of the reason why. 2011 kind of rush through a lot of this stuff, and while I think there's a couple of interesting elements to this that make this arc very fun and special, I do think it works against the general vibe that the manga had during this arc. The 2011 anime focuses much more on the fun and adventure of the exams, whereas the old one focuses much more on the tension and challenge that each exam brings to the table. There's a lot of uncertainty, concern, suspense over the challenges the main characters face and whether or not they can succeed, and this is often showcased through visuals. If you've ever been on Twitter and seen one of those 99 edits, you probably know that for sure, one of 99's most distinct areas is the direction, courtesy of Kazuhiro Furuhashi, a guy responsible for some pretty niche anime, so I don't know if you've heard of him. He did, Rurouni Kenshin, Spy X Family, really niche anime. Though he wasn't the sole factor behind 99's distinct style, as he had a cavalcade of storyboarders and episode directors backing him up, he definitely set the expectation of what 99 should be presented with. As such, 99 has this very distinct feel that always manages to adapt to each of the different story arcs done within the anime. The Hunter exam really tries to give the impression that the world of Hunter x Hunter is this vast, mysterious world that is slowly uncovered for the audience. Absolutely perfect for the tensed feel a lot of the areas of this story give off. The cinematography, background design, and art direction all help encapsulate the insanity of the Hunter exams in a way that perfectly captures the original intent by Togashi's manga. Might as well point this out now, but a very common criticism directed at 1999 is that the direction style is completely at odds with the manga, as it gives the Hunter exams this darker and grungier feel that many feel isn't what Togashi intended when presenting the Hunter exam arc, as it's argued that Hunter x Hunter is supposed to progressively get darker, and that making it dark from the get-go is missing the point of the manga. This, however, isn't very true, and actually for more than one reason. Firstly, 1999 isn't really that dark pre-York New City, at least as dark as some people will make it out to seem. It does take itself a little more seriously at times, such as when Gon and Hanzo fight, there's a larger emphasis on the brutality of the conflict, and with Gon's dilemma in the middle of the Force exam, there's a larger emphasis on the pain he goes through when he's recovering from the effects of the toxin he was hit with, among other smaller moments throughout the Hunter exams, but that's about it. The arc is as over the top and lighthearted as its manga counterpart, just it has the gall to make sure the serious scenes and tense moments commit to that feeling instead of trying to make the show feel more lighthearted than it needs to. I don't really think people understand that the manga was the exact same way as 1999. It didn't stray away from its darker content in the Hunter exams, and when it wanted to be serious, it showcased that, as Togashi would make it a point to illustrate the violence and terror of a moment. 1999 is actually more faithful to the tone of the manga than people realize here. I've also never got the complaint that 1999 being too dark takes away from the impact later arcs like York New City, Chimera Ants, and the ongoing Secession contests have with their much darker storyline, as the story seemed to be more lighthearted at the start, only to jump scare the audience with its sudden darker tonal shift, because I think that undermines the true difference between the Hunter exams, York New City, and the Secession contest, which is more so the slow introduction of more realistic and complex stories. The Hunter exams, York New City, Chimera Ants, and the Secession contest continue to escalate with deeper themes, more complex characters, more violence, and an escalating web of storylines happening at the same time. The story slowly becoming more complex is really the important thing, not how much darker it can be. It's really unfortunate that 1999 discourse is filled with loads of misconception, often from people who probably haven't even seen it, so I'll make sure to address a couple of them as I go through this video. Overall though, I think that the more suspenseful but often lighthearted approach to the Hunter exams really pays off. It feels like a mix between Yu Yu Hakusho and Pokemon. I say this as someone who hasn't actually sat down and watched the show since I was like 4, but I think that's the most apt comparison. 90s Pokemon meets Yu Yu Hakusho or something like that. Now, the Zoldyck family arc is more or less in tune with the direction style of the Hunter exams. A really standout scene is our introduction to Canary. I love the watercolor aesthetic to showcase her. I think the choice really emphasized her character so well and the loneliness she feels, but otherwise the arc isn't nothing too stand out. However, Heaven's Arena marks a very distinct change in approach with adapting the story. While the Hunter exams, as I'll get into later, most certainly took a lot of liberties in approaching the story by adding lots of non-canon material, Heaven's Arena outright rearranges much of the story on top of adding and taking away material. For example, Hisoka's fight with Castro, which acts to set the stage on the sheer difference in skill between Gon and Hisoka, as well as being our bar for what a battle between powerful Nen users will look like, is basically skipped over. While I will give benefit of doubt since Gon's fight with Top Man does illustrate to us what exactly a Nen fight can look like, plus we've already had plenty of opportunity to see how powerful Hisoka is in the past to really showcase their difference in power, it wasn't really a necessary change, and it doesn't really serve the story to remove it. The order of events being changed also takes away from the build-up towards the conflict between Gon and Hisoka, the whole reason Gon came to Heaven's Arena in the first place, since his goal was to become strong enough to fight him, which ends up happening at the very end. 99's Heaven's Arena moves it to the middle, and the fight with the boys are the real climactic battle of this version, and since the whole sequence is mostly just curb stomp battles, the arc kinda just ends. It's not bad, per se. I actually think 99's version is still good, but it's so off from what the manga was trying to do, I actually completely understand the complaints people give this one. Plus, Hisoka vs. Gon in 2011 is just phenomenal. Though to give credit where credit is due, 99's version is also very, very good, with smooth animation, great artwork, direction, all coming together in a crescendo of quality. But unfortunately, while 99's version is like a 9 out of 10, 2011's is like an 11 out of 10. I think I'll go more in detail about the quality of 1999's fight scenes later though, so overall I do want to say that 99's Heaven's Arena adaptation is good, but definitely flawed, especially if you're more familiar with the manga and or 2011. But while all of the other arcs for Hunter x Hunter 99 are great in their own way, it's York New City's adaptation where this anime really shines and goes from already really good to top tier stuff. You can tell this is 99's Chimera Ants, the arc where the production team puts all of their eggs in one basket and just popped off. Everything great about 99 is on full display: the excellent direction, storyboarding, art direction, animation, music, acting, presentation. Just everything is firing on all cylinders here, and is part of the reason York New City is easily my favorite arc in the series. There's this attempt to create this more urban, claustrophobic, oppressive feel more in line with something like Cowboy Bebop, as opposed to the suspenseful but nonetheless late 90s JRPG-inspired Hunter exam arc that kicked off the story. In fact, this shift is most notable through the music. The Hunter exam arc has a soundtrack in line with a lot of those late 90s RPG games, giving it this very adventurous PS1 era feel, but York New City mostly employs a very jazzy soundtrack to contrast the fun, adventurous feel with the more professional, cold reality of York New City. There's a reason a lot of those Twitter 90s aesthetic posts will always be posting York New City screen caps, or why Kurapika fangirls on Twitter always share images of Kurapika in this arc. Like, genuinely, it all comes together so well. I love the little subtle shot choices to effectively communicate the emotions of the various moments. I love details like that one guy playing Chopin music while the characters discuss what they should possibly do since they're undoubtedly going to be attacked, leading to them getting ambushed to the tune of Polonaise number 6 in A flat OP 53 heroic. Chopin, just call it a banger. No need to make the title so long, for fuck's sake. It's just a shame the arc initially kind of abruptly ends with Kurapika meeting with Gon, Killua, and Leorio, but it's actually kind of a poetic ending. Kurapika is hella miserable throughout this entire story arc, so for all of it to end with him finally finding some semblance of peace is really cute. All topped off by the credits recalling all the good times the characters had together. Shame that it's still very obvious the story isn't done yet, so a little under a year after the anime's abrupt ending in March 2001 came the York New City OVA in February 2002, which proceeded to finally finish the arc. Furuhashi actually doesn't direct this OVA, but his style is all over it. It all comes together so nicely. Overall, 99 handles the story of Hunter x Hunter with a lot more care than a lot of people think it does, and even if it's admittedly very visibly and even audibly lower budget, it's clearly being handled by a team that understands how to not only translate the manga to anime, but also make the manga story that much better. This is actually where I want to transition this discussion into non-canon material, also known as filler. Non-canon material has a very bad perception amongst the general anime community, and for good reason, but I think Hunter x Hunter 1999 completely defies the standard that most anime set with its non-canon material. There's no loads of padding to wait for more chapters to come out, there's no moments where the characters act barely in character for the sake of it. All of the non-canon moments are meant to bolster the story and make the impact of the canon events greater, while also adding levity when it needs to. I remember being awfully disappointed watching 2011 for the first time and discovering how many of my favorite non-canon moments, such as the final few Hunter exam participants being led to believe the final exam would be a paper test, and the elevator lady in Heaven's Arena, were entirely creations of the 1999 anime because they're that good. Examples like these don't really add anything to the story, but they do help with making the anime, well, fun. But there are specific details added to the story through non-canon material. This is mostly showcased through filler episodes. I will say though, when the filler episodes are great, they're outstanding and barely even deserve to be referred to as filler. But when they're not great, they're definitely not great. Calling them filler would even be generous if you ask me. Episode 2, for example, is outright a waste of time because we're introduced to Leorio early, even though pretty much all of his characteristics are introduced properly in episode 3 and his backstory in episode 7. They also have an episode dedicated to Kurapika's fight with Hisoka, a fight which was only a couple panels in the manga if I recall correctly, and a couple seconds in the anime since it's being told in the flashback. Here, however, it's moved to be right before Gon's fight with Hanzo, and while I appreciate the desire to showcase it, there's a reason the details were skimmed over. Nothing of value really happens until the end, so most of the episode is just generic shonen fight scene stuff such as characters reacting to the fight every time anything happens, and character banter that honestly feels very bland, at least compared to how these characters usually act. It's not bad per se, especially given by this point the audience should be fully invested in Kurapika. It's definitely a fight audience members will care about, but, like, it's very much not necessary.
However, on the contrary, you've got episodes like 11 and 12. These episodes use canon material and add non-canon material to it that directly connects to those canon events. In the case of these episodes, Gon and Killua playing ball with Netero. In the original, Netero just invites Gon and Killua to a game of get the ball out of my hand for funsies, which gives us some fun character interactions between the three characters, which is pretty nice. And in the case of the manga, it was the first time a lot of focus was put on the friendship between Gon and Killua. In 2011, we got a lot more of that before this scene. But in 1999, the context for why this happens is changed entirely. The episode is used as a vehicle to explore Killua's conflicted feelings about his family, as he and Gon are targeted by this lady who wants revenge for the murder of her father at the hands of one of Killua's family members. While Killua and Gon were already on the path to friendship, in 1999 it's here that they really solidify their friendship for the rest of this arc, as Gon seems to act completely indifferent to whatever assassination shiz Killua may have been up to and states that he wants to know him better. Killua's conflicted emotions perfectly help the audience prepare for the end arc plot twist that ends this arc, and the arc does a great job contrasting Gon and Killua, but also bringing them together. The biggest complaints the episode gets is just that people think that this is more angsty, if you can even call it that. Killua is at odds with his character, but... well, Killua's characterization is going to get its own section, so I'll save the rant for that later. There's also episodes 18, 19, and 20, all three of which being completely anime original. It gives us a completely anime original exam. Yeah, I think we get the point. It gives us a completely original exam in between Trick Tower and Zevel Island that is initially used to give the main character some fun downtime before forcing all of the hunter candidates to work together to survive a massive storm that's approaching their location. It's really well put together with great character interactions and doesn't feel like it's just padding, but giving us better insight into these characters and furthering their story. According to rumors, Togashi actually planned for this to be in the manga, but I haven't seen any concrete proof of this. The last purely non-canon episode is episode 46, which is set during Gon and Killua's misadventures on Well Island before York New City. The episode provides many scenes contrasting Killua's upbringing with Gon and serves to further bring the two friends together. However, I think the overall best non-canon episode is episode 7, which for me was when Hunter x Hunter really clicked. The episode expands on Leorio's backstory, of which was barely given any focus in both the manga in 2011. In both cases, he just tells Kurapika's backstory after he consistently argued that he could tell Leorio was definitely not in the exams just for the money. In this version, we're given an entire episode to flesh out his backstory, and very importantly, spend more time showing how that affected him. His desire to become a doctor and restoring his resolve after it was basically shattered as the first exam continued. By comparison, in the manga, he gets tired and then gets untired because his resolve is just that strong. But having all the backstory and seeing what all that means to him really helps a moment like that shine even more. And it was there that I realized I wanted to see where this arc went. The appeal of the Hunter exams is more than just the exams they take and the interactions they have, but the slow build towards all of these characters taking the first step in achieving their dreams. And I think this episode exemplifies that perfectly. Actually, before I move on from episode 7, I want to talk about how it further impacts the story due to a change made to a minor character from the Trick Tower section. During the Trick Tower section, the main characters are faced with a squad of prisoners who want to cut down their prison sentences and need to keep the characters inside the prison for as long as possible in order to do that. Of these characters, Lee Rout, I think that's how you say her name, is changed quite a bit. In the manga and in 2011, she's a little manipulative and perceptive, but that's about it. She's mostly just a character that exists for Leroy to bounce off of. But in 1999, she's a lot more darker. In this version, she has a very deep understanding of the human mind due to her background as a therapist. In fact, she's serving a life sentence for convincing one of her patients to kill themselves.
Your life is nothing. You serve zero purpose. You should kill yourself now and give somebody else a piece of that oxygen and ozone layer that's covered up so that we can breathe inside this blue trapped bubble.
While her encounter with Leorio is mostly comedic, there's a bit where it develops into something a little more sinister. She insists on referring to him as Doctor, taunts him for mishandling his group's time in the tower, and even ties it to what happened to his friend in his childhood to really stick the knife in there. Leorio is able to get his composure, but I really like the direction they took here, even if it isn't entirely faithful to the original version of this character. It really spices up a section that in the reboot feels just a bit weightless and tensionless. I have to say, overall, the approach to adding material actually helps a series more than harms it. And for those who are completely against non-canon material, I have to remind a lot of people how often 2011 used it to further its storytelling, whether that be for bad or for good. I feel like 99's non-canon material gets ragged on less for its actual quality, but for it being non-canon in general, which isn't really fair. Team 10, episode 82, I believe, from Naruto Shippuden, is probably one of the most critically acclaimed episodes from that show, and if it's not, it fucking should be. But it's almost entirely non-canon, as it expands upon the pre-existing story to further build into the upcoming set of episodes. I recognize this to say that knocking on the filler for simply existing is not fair to the filler. Otherwise, the rest of the criticism is people not really understanding any of these characters' characterization. Though I guess I should add that Tonpa being a jerk is actually a plot twist in this version that happens during episode 7. Before that, he's portrayed as a helpful nice guy. I point this out to acknowledge the one very noticeable time a major character's characterization is altered in any way. Anyways, I have no idea how to transition out of this segment, so let's talk about the art style and animation. If there's anything general audiences know about Hunter x Hunter 99, it's more than likely the art style, simply because the 90s aesthetic is highly coveted within the anime community to a very annoying degree. I say this as a 90s anime art style enjoyer myself, just so you know. The art style of that era, or at least the general one seen in most shows, is so popular that often newer anime that started in the digital coloring generation, the early 2000s to present, get fan art reimagining the art style if the show had been made during the 1990s with traditional coloring and cell animation. Because 99 is so obscure amongst general audiences, most people are surprised to learn that there's a full-on 90s version of the show and seek it out to see what it looked like. And yeah, 99 looks great, though I'm not exactly an art style analyzer though, so there really isn't much I can say about its art style that you already haven't seen with your own two eyes. I will say, I do find it really funny when people get a look at 99's art style and go, man, 90s anime hit different, their era was so unmatched, because I don't think any of them realize that, despite starting in 1999, old Hunter x Hunter is more of a 2000s anime if anything, because only about 10 of its episodes aired before the turn of the new millennium. The vast majority of its run was in 2000 and 2001, but then again, by that logic, is One Piece a 2000s, 2010s, or even a 2010s anime, even though it started back in the 90s? Fun fact, One Piece actually began the same week as Hunter x Hunter 99. But back to Hunter x Hunter, it stuck to the cell animated look despite digital coloring taking over in the early 2000s. Even when it returned in the form of OVAs in early 2002, it was still traditionally animated. It was only upon the start of Greed Island in 2003 that Hunter x Hunter finally made the transition to digital animation. Anyways, I want to move on to animation because an interesting discussion I hear within the community is that 2011 is significantly better for having the better animated fights. I don't really get this argument because Hunter x Hunter only has like 3 fight scenes of significance: Gon vs Hisoka, Kurapika vs Uvo, and Netero vs Meruem. And all 3 are absolutely beautifully animated in 2011, but there are only 3 fights in an 147 episode anime. About the fight scenes, I already admitted that I think Gon and Hisoka was better in 2011, and of course everybody knows that 99 never got to Chimerians, but Kurapika vs Uvo was a very interesting case of which I actually wanted to make an individual video about. They're both equal quality, but with different approaches by the teams responsible for their episodes. 2011 has a greater focus on animation and making sure the audience feels the hype behind the confrontation, whereas 1999 has a less is more approach with a larger focus on the art style and storyboarding, though nonetheless the animation is crisp and smooth. I'm not really going to talk about voice acting at any other point in the video, but I will say this fight shows the strengths of the 99 cast, who's considered inferior to their 2011 counterparts, of which I blame of their more subdued manner of speaking by comparison, which is a fair reason to not like their voices. However, when watching the scenes in both versions, I feel as if the actress for Kurapika is overacting in these scenes in 2011. Like, the performances are great, don't get me wrong, but I think that the colder but frustrated delivery from 99 Kurapika is much nicer.
なぜ貴様は何も考えず、何も感じずにこんな真似ができるんだ。答えろ。なぜ貴様は何も考えず、何も感じずにこんな真似ができるんだ。答えろ。
though the difference in direction is due in part to the different directions of the final moments of the scene. In 2011, it's given this loud, bombastic background music to showcase the heightened tension of the moment, climactically ending with a splash of black and white, silenced audio, and Kurapika murdering Uva with his face hidden but showing no remorse. But in 99, it's given this somber, melancholic tone. The music is muted and ambient, the visuals are soft, and the kill is very anticlimactic, which does seem like an odd choice, but given that 99's take on the story wants to emphasize the revenge is bad message, it's a very poignant choice, and it focuses the scene on Kurapika's horrified but silent reaction to what he did. This is another case of something that wasn't in the original, but honestly, I like it a lot more, and it feels right at home with how conflicted Kurapika is about his revenge and what it's doing to him. Contrary to the popular belief, he's not hesitant or conflicted about destroying the Phantom Troop. He even restores his resolve the next day. Anyways, I'm gonna move on to character designs, particularly that of Killua, because there really isn't much to say about anyone else other than half of the time when I see people exemplifying the differences in designs, they always cherry pick the bad examples from 1999 for whatever reason, especially when it comes to Canary, to a point where that has become an entire argument against a 99, when you could literally watch the next episode and discover she looks like a normal human being, and before people realize she looked like that in the manga too. Killua's design too has been a case against 99, and in general this version's characterization is somewhat controversial, but it speaks to a serious misunderstanding of his character that, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, is to blame on 2011. The public perception of Killua is that he's always been this cutesy kid who's fun-loving with family issues, plus he's small and adorable, so when people see this slightly taller, more angular design from 99 and see his colder, much more Hiei-like demeanor in that version, they automatically assume 99 took some liberties and ruined the character, when actually it's the opposite. See, the reason Killua looks and acts like this in 99 is because during the manga's run, that's what he acted and looked like. Killua's design in 99 is simply a translation of what he looked like during this part of the manga, and if you pay close attention over the course of 99, you'll see his design slowly but surely morph into a more cutesy, softer version of that design. By the time you hit Greed Island, Killua looks like an entirely different beast, and that's because the 99 staff made sure to keep his design relative to what Togashi was doing in the manga throughout the entire run, as opposed to 2011, which just copy and pasted his Greed Island era design into the Hunter exams. Killua's personality was much less concrete in the Hunter exams as opposed to what it was after. The over-the-top fun kid who sometimes murdered the heck out of people was the 2011 staff taking liberties with his character, which I've always felt was at odds with the storytelling of this part of the story, since Killua doesn't immediately warm up to Gon, but slowly over the course of the exams grows to want to be his friend, which makes his confrontation with Illumi all the more meaningful, as we've seen the growth Killua has gone through. The 2011 version is the one that took liberties, and I really need people to understand that. I don't think taking liberties is an inherent problem, but when you essentially overwrite some interesting development so Killua can be more marketable, I do find myself retching with disgust. Of course, that's not to say Killua isn't a fun brat in 99's Hunter exams, but his relationship with Gon feels more gradual. He doesn't really completely open up to Gon until after the Anita filler, after all. So I mentioned the Illumi scene, and I think I should talk about it to highlight an often praised aspect of 99, and that's its strong sense of visual direction. I talked about this briefly earlier, but 99 has a very strong direction, no thanks to Kazuhiro Furuhashi, famed director of course, the most famous anime ever, Neo Yokio, and Spy X Family and Rurouni Kenshin. I don't think those are nearly as relevant, but, you know. His stylistic choices are all over the place, from creative uses of color, beautiful backgrounds, and other interesting stylistic details. 2011 was definitely missing a sense of style during its early arcs, and 99 fills that void perfectly. But going back to the Illumi scene, it's often highlighted for its brilliant use of first-person perspective, lighting to sell the tone of the scene, and overall direction. The Gon vs. Hanzo scene, likewise, is heavily praised for things such as storyboarding for helping give the audience that sense that Gon is ultra screwed during this entire sequence. There's a fundamental understanding of how to make some of the most important scenes of the arc have a lasting impact on the audience, and it's one of 99's strongest areas. It's why Kurapika staring at a guy can get 4 million views if it's the 99 version. There was an actual attempt to make the audience understand the genuine, unspeakable fury Kurapika was going through towards the middle of York New City. I like how they don't even show the audience Kurapika as a reaction to Neon getting the scarlet eyes. We get this close-up of Kurapika before he turns his eyes to the audience, this far-off hallway shot of his coworkers approaching him before he gets up and leaves. No words needed to tell us he's drowning in an indescribable amount of emptiness. They just show it with visuals alone. I really love that about 99. Though since we're on the subject of art and animation though, I do need to address one area of its art and animation that isn't often talked about, but still is important when judging the art quality of the show, and that's the consistency of its art. In much older anime, it's significantly more noticeable when a new team of animators take over for the next episode, as often the art style will ever so slightly shift depending on who's the animation director or supervisor for the episode. Though this isn't a universal problem, it can be a bit off-putting, especially since often specific directors have significantly different approaches to the character designs. The fan favorite of the animation directors is easily Akira Matsushima, who many Demon Slayer fans may know for being the character designer for that show. The episodes under his supervision in Hunter x Hunter approach the characters with a more realistic edge, with solid art and often solid animation backing it up. Other notable animation directors include Masaki Kanan, Shinobu Takashira, Kyoji Asano, and Takayuki Goto, whose approach in many ways mirrored what Matsushima and his team were doing for their episodes. On the other hand, you have guys like Tateru Namikaze, Masahide Yangisawa, Masahiro Kaze, Tomoki Mizuno, Tomoaki Sakayama, and Kenichi Imaizumi, who all approach their episodes with a significantly more simplistic style to various degrees. So in 99, you kind of have a back and forth of various styles, ranging from a more Cowboy Bebop-esque approach to the Hunter x Hunter designs versus a more simple but cute approach to the designs. And then we have Koichi Hatsumi's episodes, where I'm very sure someone forgot to give his team the character design sheet, so he just used the manga as reference, because his designs are straight out of the manga, with character proportions and features being stylized as if Togashi himself were animating. He's very underrated in my honest opinion. One of the most widely loved areas of Hunter x Hunter is its music. The orchestral rock mix utilized by Yoshihisa Hinano creates a very unique feel for the show, and he's able to capture the fun, adventure, seriousness, and feel of the show quite nicely. Even before I started watching Hunter x Hunter, I always really liked listening to its soundtrack. So 99 is often written off because it's not nearly as iconic as the one from its younger brother. That's a shame, because 99's soundtrack is deceptively good. I briefly went into it earlier in this video, but to recap, composer Toshihiko Sahashi, well known for his works on shows like The Big O, the various Fatal Fury anime, Gunslinger Girl, and recently the 2020 Digimon anime, seeks to create a feel in line with JRPGs of the era. He utilizes a lot more traditional sounding instruments like bongos and flutes, combining that with subtle hints of computerized synths and sometimes rock, sprinkle in string and horn sections alongside bits of jazz every now and then, and all of this combined creates a very unique approach to the soundtrack that feels very at home in the world of Hunter x Hunter. Though, as I also mentioned while discussing music earlier, the music undergoes a shift during York New City. The music takes on a more jazz feel. The traditional instruments are out, loud brass sections are in. Sahashi also goes as far to create a very cinematic feel with some of the tracks such as The Spiders vs. the Zoldyck Family, Uvogen vs. Kurapika, and Silva's Entry. I will say personally, the instrumentation does hold the York New tracks back just a bit, but overall it paints a perfect, more moody picture for York New City. While in a vacuum, I prefer 2011's soundtrack. I like 99's more in the context of what's actually happening in the show. 2011's soundtrack tends to be utilized in very odd ways. Rarely is the music unfitting for the scene, but often the choices are questionable. One offhand example is when Kurapika goes to the mansion for his new job. The background music is this loud set of drums meant to rile up a sense of tension in the moment. Fitting, but Kinda plain. The 99 version sets the scene to a calm piano, really painting the location as classy and sophisticated, and is very much at odds with the type of music that came before. No thanks to it not even being from the soundtrack, as it came from a free music library. It sets the tone for the type of story that'll come after. This is just one example, but stuff like this is pretty common with music choices kind of feeling bland in 2011. You know, it could be the scene where Gon was so mad about what happened to Kite that he almost unintentionally killed a guy because, like, great scene, very confusing music choice. Like, am I supposed to feel scared or hyped as hell? They also used it when Kurapika confronted that mafia boss with the scarlet eyes. I raised the question again. Who is placing the music in 2011? Ultimately, all I have to say is that I feel there's a better understanding as to what type of music to use for certain scenes when and where in 1999, and I really appreciate that. So while I do prefer 2011's soundtrack just a bit, I think 1999 works very well too. Last thing I want to say about the music is I do want to point to the dichotomy between 99's main theme and 2011's. They're both absolutely phenomenal and are iconic in their own right, and equally good, so I'm not going to pretend one is objectively better than the other. What I will say is that I find it super interesting how they both kind of reflect each version of their stories though. 2011's is loud, fun, and energetic, and feels right at home at the exciting adventurous start of the series, whereas 1999 has a more serious, determined feel to it, representing the more tense side of the story, but presenting it with a sense of adventure. I actually forgot to note this in my outline of the script, but before I move on to the sound effects, I really have to talk about the openings and endings. Hot take, I do not care for Just Awake. Kaze no Uta clears, and it's not even close. This is just my opinion, but I'm going to pretend it's factual anyways. Unlike 2011, which only has departure through the entire run of the series, 99 actually has various openings. Over the course of its TV run, it only had two, Ohayo and Taiyo wa Yoromo Kagayaku. Ohayo isn't very flashy, it doesn't really say much about the show, it's just the boys waking up in the morning and getting ready for another day of adventure. The song is very chill but upbeat, and while initially I thought the opening was super underwhelming, as the story goes along, I couldn't help but enjoy it all the more. It has a kind of nostalgic feeling to it, I guess. Now, the second opening, on the other hand, is another story. Gone is the sunshine and rainbows, and replacing it is an opening that really fits the darker tone of York New City. The opening is mostly just character stills and moving backgrounds, but the way it's all presented makes it feel much more than just that. Shots like Crollo standing against the streets of York New with his upside-down cross glowing behind him before the face of Kurapika fades in, or Kurapika staring at the eclipse with all of his different chains cluttering the screen, or Crollo conducting the Requiem, or Kurapika throwing his chain at the eclipse. For an opening that on surface level doesn't have much going on, it really feels like there's a lot more going on. I never thought about this until just now, but I like the eclipse motif because in a way it kind of represents how sudden the tonal shift was. All of a sudden there's a sense of darkness over the series, and just like an eclipse, after a while it goes away and it's all sunny again. The power of visual storytelling. Though I guess I should mention the other three openings, all of which are used for the OVAs. Opening 3 is when the animation studio started making their openings more flashy. There's a lot more symbolism, like Kurapika suddenly getting shrouded by darkness while he's hanging with Gon and Killua, and there's also this lovely shot of Kurapika and Pakunoda facing off, which I'm pretty sure you've seen if you've been around those 90s anime aesthetic Twitter accounts. Reminder, this OVA came out in 2002. The last two were the Greed Island OVAs, which I really don't want to acknowledge, but if I have to, both are pretty good. The first of these two openings was, Prey. I forgot who it was by, but it's, again, not very flashy, but I like the song. It's very catchy, a lot of bubblegum J-pop. There really isn't much to say about it, I just think it's really catchy. The second one has two versions, fun fact. The first is this low-budget, really bad, just poorly done opening that was clearly rushed out because they had nothing else to do here. They ended up redoing it, and it is just Gon, Killua, and Misc flying through the air with some character stills and stuff, but it kind of works, and it's also very catchy. There really isn't much to say. This isn't even in my script. I'm literally just doing this off the cuff because I felt that I probably should have said more about it, but you know, that's about it. I'm just there. I'm gonna move on. All right, let's go. Now, while the music in this show is great, the sound effects are an entirely different story. Sometimes they're okay, but other times... Not quite. They're audibly stock sound effects, and I really want to know why exactly they couldn't get better ones. I already have the impression that, despite how good the series is, it had to have had a very low budget for an anime plan to run for a couple of years, but nowhere else in the show was that shown more than in its very bad sound effects. It's most notable during fight scenes though, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but nonetheless, it's still a very off-putting detail. Though I guess the voice acting is a little bit worse in 2011. As I mentioned earlier, the performances feel much more muted and, downbeat. It's definitely not bad, but I can see why people don't like them as much as 2011, though I do like Gon and Killua's voice actresses in this version. Gon is played by the lady who voices Naruto, and she's absolutely great in the role. And then there's Killua's voice. It has this very bratty kid feel that I just think is perfect for the character. Very different from the direction the characters would go in 2011, but I think they're a lot better than people give them credit for. Now the English dub, on the other hand...
Well, you're up bright and early.
It's weird. Last night I was so excited, I was wide awake. But then as soon as my head hit the pillow, I fell right to sleep.
It's kind of bad. The voices themselves, aside from Gon's, are fine, but the lines are delivered in very stilted, unnatural ways. You'd think that since it's a dub of a show from the late 90s/early 2000s, it would make sense that the dub would sound bad, but the dub actually came out in 2008, by which time most anime dubs were at least alright. Viz apparently made Blue Water Studios do the dub, and the only other thing I know them for is their dub of Dragon Ball GT. So with that being said, I've gone through everything I ever really wanted to say about this anime. I've really wanted to make this video for years, because I've always felt this anime gets the short end of the stick within the Hunter x Hunter community for a lot of misconceptions, and plus I'd like to help people who aren't familiar with this version of the series understand what makes it so good. But ultimately you might be wondering which one I like better. I don't remember if I answered that question or not in this video already, but if I didn't, I'm gonna keep it that way. This video isn't meant to answer the question if 1999 is better or if 2011 is better. Honestly, they're both solid in their own fields, and all I want is for people to understand that 99 is actually really good, and a lot of the criticism it gets isn't particularly fair. I don't think there's an objective way to measure which one is better. I think it boils down to personal preference and what you want to see out of your Hunter x Hunter. If you want a more modern rendition of the series with consistent art, quick pacing, and lovely music, then 2011 is for you. If you want a more classic, more stylistic take on the series, then 1999 is for you. Though I should add that I don't particularly care for the idea that 2011 wins on the basis of having chimera ants. Like, guys, it doesn't have Menchie in a bath towel with her hair down. I don't think you see the big picture here. I hope that everyone who watches this considers giving 1999 a chance, and watching it for themselves if they have the time. Though I don't really know how you will, because it's not on any streaming services. Aside from pirating websites, the only easy way of accessing it for many would be YouTube, since many people upload it here for free, but it keeps getting taken down by some random guy from the Philippines for some reason. The best way to watch it, as far as I know, is a little remaster project by some guys on Reddit. I'll link them in the description. Go check them out if you get the chance, because it's by far the most definitive way to watch the series. But for real though, if Viz still has the rights to the series, here's hopes that someday they re-release the series on some streaming services like Crunchyroll or fuck, even Netflix, since 2011's already there. I don't really see why they can't do it if they already don't have the rights. In fact, Viz, while you're at it, could you please redub the show with the modern cast up to episode 70? No disrespect to the old English cast, but as a dub watcher, I think this show really deserves it. Plus, it would honestly be really cool to see the new cast do the old show. I doubt this video will get more than 100 views, and honestly, that's kind of an optimistic estimate. I think 40 at best. But if you care enough, audience, maybe we can start a Twitter campaign for this. Something like, I don't know, hashtag put Hunter x Hunter 1999 on Crunchyroll, and maybe get the Reddit guys to remaster the show officially, since the quality wasn't great in the last DVD release because it was released back in 2009. So yeah, that's really all I had to say. This is Hunter x Hunter 99. It's peak, it's amazing, and I think it deserves a fair shot. Okay, so I really wanted to just briefly say thank you for sitting through this video, and also, ever so briefly, explain why this video looks so bad. I mean, at least the 99 footage, and that's because I initially started editing this on my old computer, where I had trouble ripping the Reddit remaster onto my computer, ripping it, torrenting it, or, you know, just putting it on my goddamn computer, and I couldn't get it, and especially not because my computer, my old computer that I started editing this with, had like 10 gigabytes on it. So the end result was that I had to get other footage from a pirating website, and that footage was crusty as hell. And so the end result is the bad footage quality in this video, and I'm really sorry about that. I also kind of had a little bit of trouble reading off my script because I'm really not used to doing video essays. This was like the first time I've ever done something like that, so I was just trying to figure it out in my head, just figure out what I was gonna do with the script. I think by the end of it, I was kind of figuring it out, and that's really good. I hope that I can continue getting this right from this point forward. I'm really hoping to do more anime videos. I love talking about anime, so I hope I can get another one out here. And just if you care enough, why not subscribe and see what I cook next? I'm thinking about doing a Full Metal Alchemist 2003 video next, because I did briefly trash talk it, and because I really wanted to cover it and say, oh, it wasn't that good, guys, you're just being nostalgic blind. But I recently rewatched it and I actually liked it a lot, and so I think I might make a video talking about, okay, I was wrong about FMA. It's actually really underrated and y'all need to give it a shot. But yeah, I think very importantly, I just wanted to say, hey, I know this video wasn't perfect, just kind of going through the motions. I just, I want to say thank you for sitting through it nonetheless, and subscribe. That's really it. So yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll catch you all next time.